And this is where it started 40 years ago. Southwestern House, or Southwestern Hotel, as it was before the BBC moved in. And of course the Titanic passengers spent their last night ashore here in this hotel before their fateful voyage. My first day at work was in October 1967. I walked through that main door into this hall, and I just thought, wow, what a place to come to work. The Southwestern Hotel had been the centre of Southampton's social life for nearly a century. Now, in 1961, it was to take on a completely new persona, the headquarters of BBC South, and this announcement from the then Director General, Hugh Carlton-Green.
This evening we're moving a step further in our development of a special service for viewers in the South, to give you the responsible news service you expect from the BBC.
Of course, Southwestern House was synonymous with the great liners.
Half ahead all engines. Half ahead all engines.
The very first news event I covered for BBC South was the final departure of perhaps the most famous of them all, the Queen Mary. A huge occasion, and the city turned out to say a fond but sad farewell. The views from Southwestern House of the grand old lady's departure were of course superb. Today, the top floors of the building had been made into luxurious flats, in one of which I caught up with South Today's first presenter and first producer to go down memory lane. I was reminded that they'd jumped the gun with the first edition.
At that time, commercial television were planning to start as well, and we realised that Southern Television were going to go on the air in January '61, and our plans were brought forward to make sure that we got on the air at about the same time, so that we could compete and fight for the Southern audience.
And you certainly were competing, weren't you?
Oh, head-to-head, yes. I mean, we started off in our planning period by recruiting some of the key people from our competitors, including our good friend Martin here, who'd already had a couple of years on the air with Southern and moved over and became the centrepiece of South at 6, as it was then called.
So, Martin, you were the first presenter. Can you remember that night?
Well, I certainly can. It was, well, we got through it all right, but I can tell you there was a few butterflies for me, because, of course, the BBC is very, very different to Southern Television. I mean, there's quite a difference. And we had, if I may say so, clapped out old BBC cameras. You know, we had things that had been thrown on the scrap heap to sort of work, and they half the time broke.
We were all in our 20s at the time. The whole group here was in our 20s, and given the chance of setting up and creating this new regional television nightly programme, and it started then and is still running, and it's wonderful to see how it's continued over the years.
One young man took over the presentation of South Today in 1967.
Cue Bruce.
And the resumed M3 inquiry at Winchester.
He's, well, still going. Gone are the typewriters of the BBC newsroom, the telex machines which gave us the news from the agencies, and the bulky film cameras which were later to give way to video. The first decade saw some major events in the south of England, not least the invention of the hovercraft by Sir Christopher Cockerell, a National Union of Seamen strike which crippled South Coast ports, and of course, queues everywhere the Beatles went for their concerts. So the BBC forges ahead with its regional broadcasting in the 1960s. Come the 1970s, big changes. That's for tomorrow on Southern Ways. In the 1970s, regional television went from black and white pictures to colour pictures.
Cue Paul.
This is Run BBC UK.
One in the South.
3, 2, 1, on film.
It meant changing all the systems, the cameras, the processing, all that sort of thing. So, huge disruption here at Southwestern House, but in fact, huge disruption in the country at large. Strikes, industrial action, terrorism.
The Aldershot bombing was the worst ever act of terrorism in this country. It was planned as revenge for Londonderry's bloody Sunday.
The south of England was the first area of mainland Britain to receive a blast from the IRA with the bombing of the army base of the Parachute Regiment in Aldershot. The bombing was to result in the first of many IRA trials held subsequently at the Crown Court in Winchester. Explosives intended for the QE2 were discovered in the base of a block of flats in Southampton. A policeman was the victim of an IRA shooting on Christmas Eve 1974. At the end of the decade, Romsey mourned the Irish Republican murder of Lord Mountbatten of Burma. Crowned heads of state attended the funeral from all over Europe. Although the 70s was the decade of the three-day week and power blackouts, two of the BBC's most famous news people remember their regional television days with fondness.
I think my very favourite programme, and Bruce Parker will remember this clearly, was the one where when we used to join in with that much beloved programme Nationwide, and we started off at 6 o'clock in the evening with the introduction from Nationwide, and then we came to the studio in Southampton, and instead of seeing Bruce, what you saw was a blank screen in which Bruce hove into sight like that. Mainly because we started the programme without any cameramen in the studio, due to a little oversight. I don't know what it was, but these things used to happen regularly in BBC Southampton. It was a very extraordinary place to work for.
People who really relate to things that are happening around them, and relate to the people who are reporting what's happening around them. And I sometimes think that nobody is more popular or has so much fondness directed towards them than the people who appear on BBC regional magazine programmes, and particularly Saturday, I think.
Bruce Parker again. You must ask Bruce. Bruce, when I first got there, and I one afternoon was told I might be presenting the programme next week, I was actually struck with terror, partly because it wasn't so much the audience, lovely people, but the studio, which is a kind of a technical hellhole. And Bruce said, "It's all right," he said. "When it all goes wrong," he said, "which it will," he said, "there's always this," and he pointed under the desk, and I said, "What's there?" And he said, "I always keep," he said, "the Guinness Book of Records handy." He said, "Our audience has learnt a lot in the past 9 months." He's freaked out a bit.
All the usual weather stories in the 70s, with Dorset in particular cut off by huge drifts of snow in 1978. And there was that story of Victor the giraffe, who did the splits at Marwell Zoo, but who, after Herculean efforts to get him up on his 4 long legs, finally gave up the struggle himself and died. So that's the 70s. In the 80s, another revolution in television, the use of videotape. We also had a war, and we raised the Mary Rose. That's tomorrow. The 80s was perhaps the decade which saw the BBC news operation here in the south of England at its finest. Our soldiers and our ships left for the Falklands and returned victorious. On April the 5th, 1982, the task force set sail from Portsmouth, a force headed by HMS Hermes and HMS Invincible. South today was dominated by the Falklands conflict for weeks. Perhaps the biggest event was the departure of 5 Brigade on the hurriedly converted Southampton liner QE2.
It was the biggest show of national fervour since the Falklands crisis began. We've a special programme which takes you through an historic day. Slow and stately, she swung away from the quayside, taking 3,000 men off to a battle zone 8,000 miles away.
Taking over from Jenny Murray was Debbie Thrower. Our old studio in Southwestern House is currently being converted into a central area of leisure among a luxury block of apartments. Terribly echoey here, isn't it?
Very. I mean, it's cavernous, isn't it? But isn't it gracious? I mean, it doesn't look anything like the studio used to be.
And this was where, of course, Eisenhower and Churchill met and discussed plans for D-Day.
It's a really historic spot, this, isn't it? I had no idea that it had that amount of history attached to it.
And brings back memories for you, of course.
Oh, it does. What really comes back to me is my audition here. And I remember the bosses said, have a morning audition, and I came down and they put me through my paces, and it seemed to go quite well, and I came out feeling quite buoyant. Went upstairs and they went to put the tape in the machine to play it back, and it was absolutely blank. and there was nothing on it at all. And they said, can you come back tomorrow and do it again? I went, tomorrow? So I came back and I was a bag of nerves and I did a dreadful audition.
But you got the job.
I still got the job.
And you sat with me all those years.
Yeah.
I remember coming back from a story and presenting you with a bunch of flowers.
Oh, that was a lovely time, yes. 2 old boys down in Dorset, I think, and something dreadful had happened to them. They'd had a nasty news event in their lives. And anyway, all they could think of, bless them, was to cut their flowers, formed a beautiful bouquet, which they gave to you, and you then presented it to me on the programme.
Will you take these back to Debbie?
I'd love to. I mean, she'll be absolutely delighted with them. How very nice of you.
Yes,
You've
yes.
grown these yourself?
Oh, yes.
That's really kind of you.
Oh, no, I was only too pleased. I was about, where's Debbie?
Well, I was absolutely touched. Thank you both so much. It really is kind.
It was lovely, and it just underlines how close you are to your audience in a region, aren't you? I still feel that link with the viewers, and I just thought it was a very gentlemanly, chivalrous thing to do.
That's ITV though, isn't it now? The 80s also saw the raising of the Mary Rose from the Solent seabed. A huge operation in itself, of course, but one which the BBC tackled in mammoth broadcasts. There is the first sight of this flagship of Henry VIII. It's the first time we have seen this in 437 years.
A wonderful moment. You hear all the sirens ringing, and I should think probably the Navy will get in on the act. It has.
Then the bombing of the Grand Hotel in Brighton during the Conservative Party conference, with several people killed and seriously injured. The Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, herself, had been inches away from death. And the central royal event was the marriage of the Prince of Wales and Lady Diana Spencer, spending the first part of their honeymoon at Broadlands in Romsey. Well, it was the end of an era for BBC South as the 80s drew to a close. We left South Western House here for new premises. That's tomorrow. So, the beginning of a new decade, and we leave South Western House after 30 years and move into a brand new building. So, all change. Not quite all change, because there are 2 ladies, Diane and Moira, who've been here nearly as long as I have, 30 years. Now, Diane, you must have met an awful lot of people.
Yes, we have. Back, right from the beginning, we met Prince Andrew and Tony Blair and lots of our favourite people like Les Dawson. He was one of my favourites. He came in costume for Panto and he kissed me and I couldn't get the lipstick off my face for days.
And do you get on together? I mean, you've been working here together for 30 years.
Yes, Bruce, never a cross word. Yes, we go out socially. We're going out on Saturday Greek dancing.
Now, I must say, you haven't changed since I first met you. And Diane, we've got some film of you in 1976, and you haven't changed much either.
I got older, a lot older.
But if some of the people inside this new building weren't, well, entirely new, the technology was. BBC Southampton was state-of-the-art, and the region was forging ahead in its news gathering. It was Sally, of course, who presented the first programme in the new building.
And what a day that was. I remember coming in and seeing the studio downstairs, because it's actually a floor below us here. Massive. I mean, it must have been at least 2 or 3 times the size of the studio back at South Western House. And of course, this newsroom as well, completely open plan, so that we're all working together very happily. But the only thing I suppose that hasn't changed is my desk. This desk is just as untidy as it was back in South Western House.
Now, you haven't quite reached my longevity of 33 years, but you have done 13 years, I think, here.
13 years.
The hair's gone up and down a bit, hasn't it?
The hair has been... What do they say? I've got hair for radio, really, not for television. It is the most difficult hair. My hairdresser says it's very, very difficult. It's been up, it's been down, it's been long. It's every time it grows, it gets thicker. It's awful hair, terrible hair.
And you've had a lot of men too.
Yes, in the nicest possible way. I've had a lot of men. Yes, I mean, how many have I sat next to? I think it's 7 main presenters that I've sat next to. If you go through them, it's Bruce, Paddy, Mark, Dominic, Harry. Andrew, of course, and Roger now. So I'm on my 7th one. They're putting notches on the back of my chair at the moment.
Careful, you can phone a friend. Who's your favourite? The big regional news stories of the 90s were those involved with the environment, particularly road building. The road protests at Twyford Down with the extension of the M3 around Winchester were nightly on our screens, as were the anti-roads protests when the Newbury bypass was being constructed. The BBC is increasingly committed to regional television, The present BBC Director General remembers well his own career with the local commercial channel TVS, working in competition with South Today.
Well, I remember the BBC was still in its old building in those days, and it was a pretty awful building, and everybody there envied the facilities that TVS had, which were far better. Of course, that's all changed now. And of course, the head-to-head was Fred Dinenage and Fern Britton against Bruce Parker and whoever was there at the time, and they were pretty. They were good bust-ups. They were competitive times.
And from Broadcasting House in London, the Director General has this message both for South Today and its audience.
It's a very good programme. It's been very effective. It's now, winning its time slot very easily, but we can do better. To the audience, I would say, carry on watching and carry on enjoying it, and we'll try to serve you.